This morning, we're getting a closer look at the largest coordinated border operation here in New Mexico in more than a year. Chief Gregory Bovino says the joint effort between CBP and ICE resulted in 200 arrests in just 48 hours. These were targeted apprehensions of individuals with serious criminal histories.
I've worked the southern border for 19 years. I've seen everything, or at least I thought I had. Families crossing in the dead of night, drug mules with backpacks stuffed with fentanyl, coyotes abandoning children in the desert when things got too hot. But what happened during those 48 hours in late spring changed the way I understand this job. It changed the way I understand the enemy we're fighting. My name is Senior Patrol Agent Daniel Vance. I'm stationed at the Tucson sector, one of the busiest corridors along the entire southwest border. I've got 2 decades of dust in my lungs, 3 commendations on my wall, and a marriage that barely survived the first 10 years of this career. My wife, Elena, stopped asking me what I see out there a long time ago. Some things you just don't bring home. It was a Tuesday morning when everything started. I remember, because Tuesdays are usually quiet, relatively speaking. The weekend rush dies down, smugglers regroup, and we get a few hours to breathe. But that Tuesday, there was no breathing. I was finishing my coffee in the sector station when Supervisory Agent Marcus Caldwell walked in with a look I'd only seen a handful of times in my career. It's the look that says something big is coming and none of us are going to like it. Vance conference room. Now, full tactical team. I didn't ask questions. I just moved. The conference room was already packed when I arrived. Agents from multiple units, K9, mobile surveillance, horse patrol, even a few guys from the Special Operations Group I hadn't seen since a cartel interdiction 3 years back. The air was thick with tension and the smell of burned coffee. Caldwell stood at the front, next to a screen displaying satellite imagery of our sector. Red dots clustered along known crossing corridors like a disease spreading across a map. "Listen up," he began, his voice cutting through the murmur. 48 hours ago, intelligence flagged unusual activity across multiple sectors: Tucson, El Paso, Rio Grande Valley, San Diego. At first, it looked like standard surge patterns. Seasonal uptick, nothing we haven't handled before. He clicked to the next slide. More red dots, more clusters. But then our analysts noticed something. The patterns weren't random, they were coordinated. Crossings timed to overwhelm specific checkpoints. Diversionary groups drawing our units east while primary loads moved west. Someone's running a playbook out there, and it's not the usual smuggling operation. A younger agent near the back raised his hand. "Cartel coordination?" Caldwell nodded slowly. "That's the working theory, but it gets worse. We've been running background checks on recent apprehensions, cross-referencing with federal databases, Interpol, Mexican authorities. What we're finding is troubling." He clicked again. Mugshots filled the screen. Faces I didn't recognize, but rap sheets I understood immediately. Aggravated assault, armed robbery, drug trafficking, sexual assault, murder. These aren't economic migrants. Caldwell continued. They're not asylum seekers. They're criminals, violent criminals, being deliberately embedded within larger migrant groups. The cartels are using the chaos as cover to move their most dangerous assets into the interior. The room went silent. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 48 hours ago, Chief Bovino authorized Operation Desert Reckoning, a full-scale enforcement surge targeting these high-risk individuals. Every available asset is being deployed. Mobile units, aerial surveillance, K9 teams, sensor arrays, everything. Our mission is simple: identify, intercept, and remove as many of these threats as possible before they disappear into the country. He looked directly at me. "Vance, you're leading Alpha Team. You'll be working the Nogales corridor with Martinez, Chen, and Ruiz. Intel suggests heavy activity in your sector over the next 24 hours. You find them, you stop them. No exceptions." I nodded, but inside, my mind was already racing. The Nogales corridor is rough terrain, mountains, canyons, thick brush that swallows sound and light. It's where smugglers go when they want to vanish. And now we were being told that somewhere in that darkness, violent criminals were moving toward American communities. After the briefing, I found Martinez outside, checking his gear. Hector Martinez had been my partner for 7 years, a former Marine who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining Border Patrol. If there was anyone I wanted beside me when things went sideways, it was him. "You catch all that?" I asked. He didn't look up from his vest. "Caught enough. Sounds like we're hunting wolves dressed as sheep." Something like that. He finally met my eyes. "You know what bothers me? These cartels, they're not stupid. If they're running an operation this coordinated, they know we're going to respond, which means they're expecting us. I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. The cartels had eyes everywhere, scouts on hilltops, informants in border towns, even compromised communications in some sectors. If they knew we were coming, they'd be ready. Then we'll have to be readier, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. We loaded into the vehicles at 1,400 hours. 4 trucks, 16 agents, enough firepower to handle most situations. But as we rolled toward the Nogales corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling that most situations wasn't going to cover what waited for us out there. The desert has a way of making you feel small. Miles of nothing but scrub brush, saguaro cactus, and dust that gets into everything, your clothes, your gear, your lungs. The mountains rise in the distance like broken teeth, and the silence is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. We established our forward position just before sunset, a ridge overlooking a known crossing point, a dry wash that funnels foot traffic through a narrow canyon. Smugglers love it because it provides cover. We love it because it provides a choke point. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, I checked my equipment one final time. Night vision, thermal scope, radio, sidearm, rifle, water, the tools of the trade. Chen set up the sensor array while Ruiz coordinated with aerial surveillance. A Black Hawk was on station 5 miles east, ready to respond if we needed backup. And then we waited. That's the part they don't show you in the movies, the waiting. Hours of staring into darkness, listening for footsteps, watching thermal signatures flicker in and out of range. Your eyes play tricks on you. A bush becomes a person. A coyote becomes a threat. You learn to trust your training, not your instincts, because your instincts will get you killed out here. It was just past midnight when the first group appeared. Contact, Chen whispered over the radio. 12 signatures, moving north through the wash, half a click out. I raised my thermal scope and found them immediately. A cluster of bodies moving in single file, following a guide who knew the terrain. Standard formation for a smuggling operation. Hold position, I ordered. Let them enter the canyon. We watched as they moved closer, their heat signatures bright against the cool desert floor. I counted heads, 12, just as Chen had said. But something felt off. Martinez. You see what I see? He was silent for a moment. The spacing, they're too spread out. Smugglers keep their groups tight, easier to control. He was right. These people were moving like they expected trouble, like they were trained to move in hostile territory. Command, Alpha Team. We have 12 signatures approaching the intercept zone, requesting background on any priority targets in this sector. The radio crackled. Alpha Team Command. Intel shows possible high-value targets in your grid. 1 individual flagged for prior deportation and aggravated assault. Another was suspected cartel affiliation. Proceed with caution. Proceed with caution. Easy to say from a climate-controlled command center. Harder to do when you're lying in the dirt with criminals walking toward you. All units prepare to move on my signal, I said. Non-lethal first. We take them alive if possible. We waited until the group was deep in the canyon, committed to the path with no easy escape routes. Then I gave the order. Go. We moved like shadows, converging from 3 directions. Flashlights blazed to life, cutting through the darkness. Voices shouted commands in Spanish and English. Border Patrol, hands in the air, on the ground now. Most of them complied immediately. Migrants who'd been told this was their chance at a new life, now realizing they'd been used as human shields for something much darker. They dropped to their knees, hands raised, fear etched across their faces. But not all of them. 2 men at the back of the group broke and ran. They moved fast, faster than exhausted migrants should be able to move, and they were heading straight for the canyon walls. Runners, Martinez shouted. I've got the one on the left. I took off after the other one. He was younger than me by at least a decade, and he knew the terrain, or at least he moved like he did. But I'd been chasing people through this desert for 19 years. I knew every rock, every shadow, every trick the landscape could play. He scrambled up a slope, sending loose stones cascading down. I followed, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. The years don't make this easier. They just make you more stubborn. At the top of the ridge, he turned, and that's when I saw the knife. It wasn't a small blade, 6 inches of steel, glinting in the moonlight. He held it like someone who knew how to use it. Drop the weapon, I commanded, my hand on my sidearm. There's nowhere to go. He said nothing, just stared at me with eyes that held no fear, no desperation, only cold calculation. In that moment, I understood what we were dealing with. This wasn't a man fleeing poverty or violence. This was a predator, caught in the open, deciding whether to fight or surrender. Last chance, I said. Drop it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The desert wind whispered through the canyon below, carrying the distant sounds of agents processing the rest of the group. Then, slowly, he let the knife fall. I cuffed him right there on the ridge, reading him his rights while catching my breath. When I ran his prints through the mobile scanner, the results came back in seconds. 3 prior deportations, conviction for armed robbery in California, suspected ties to a trafficking organization operating out of Sinaloa. This was just the beginning. By dawn of the first day, we'd processed 47 individuals. Of those, 11 were flagged as criminal aliens with prior records, everything from drug possession to violent assault. 3 had outstanding warrants. 1 was a confirmed member of a transnational gang whose tattoos told a story of violence that made my skin crawl. But there was no time to rest. The operation was just ramping up. I grabbed 4 hours of sleep in the back of a patrol vehicle while Martinez kept watch. When I woke, the sun was already climbing, and the radio was alive with chatter from units across the sector. Bravo team reporting 36 apprehensions overnight. Multiple criminal flags. Charlie team engaged a group of 20 near Sasabi. 2 attempted to flee, both in custody. Delta team requesting aerial support. Large group moving through Sector 7. It was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. The cartels had bet on overwhelming our capacity, and for a while it seemed like they might succeed. But Chief Bovino's strategy was working. By flooding the zone with assets, we were catching groups faster than they could adapt. Around noon, I received new orders. A reconnaissance drone had spotted unusual activity near an abandoned ranch house 15 miles east of our position. Thermal imaging showed multiple heat signatures inside, but no one had entered or exited for hours. Could be a stash house, Caldwell said over the radio, or a staging point. Either way, we need eyes on it. We rolled out 30 minutes later Alpha Team, reinforced by a K-9 unit and 2 additional agents from the Special Operations Group. The drive took us through some of the most desolate terrain in the sector, past abandoned mines and ghost towns that hadn't seen inhabitants in decades. The ranch house sat at the end of a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. It was old, maybe 100 years old, with adobe walls crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. But someone had been there recently. Fresh tire tracks led to a shed behind the main structure, and a generator hummed somewhere out of sight. We established a perimeter and approached in teams. Martinez and I took the front entrance, while Chin and Ruiz covered the back. The K-9 handler, a veteran named Patterson, held his German Shepherd on a short leash, the dog's ears pricked forward with focused intensity. "Border Patrol," I announced, my voice echoing off the walls. "Come out with your hands visible." No response. I signaled Martinez, and we moved through the door in a controlled breach. The interior was dark, the windows boarded over with plywood. The smell hit me immediately. Sweat, fear, and something else. Something chemical. "Clear left," Martinez reported. "Clear right," I confirmed. We moved deeper, room by room, until we reached the back of the structure. That's where we found them. 18 people, crammed into a space meant for storage. Men, women, a few children no older than 10. They flinched when our flashlights found them, shielding their eyes from the brightness, but it wasn't the migrants who caught my attention. It was the 3 men standing apart from the group, near a table covered with phones, cash, and documents. They weren't afraid. They were angry. "On the ground, now," I shouted. One of them moved not toward the door, but toward the table, toward something beneath the documents. Patterson released the dog. The German Shepherd covered the distance in seconds, bringing the man down before his hand could reach whatever was hidden there. The other 2 dropped to their knees, finally showing the fear that had been absent moments before. When we secured the scene and examined the table, I understood why. Beneath the papers was a handgun, a Glock 19, loaded, with the serial number filed off. Beside it, we found bundles of cash totaling over $20,000 and encrypted phones that would later yield messages coordinating crossings across multiple sectors. The 3 men weren't migrants. They were coordinators, mid-level operatives managing the flow of people and goods across the border, and we just disrupted their entire operation. "This is bigger than we thought," Martinez said quietly, watching as agents led the men away in cuffs. I nodded, surveying the scene. The migrants huddled together, relief and confusion mixing on their faces. They'd paid thousands of dollars for the promise of a new life. Instead, they'd been brought to a crumbling building in the middle of nowhere, used as cover for a criminal enterprise that saw them as nothing more than commodities. It always is, I replied. It always is. We spent the next 3 hours processing the scene. The migrants were transported to a processing center for evaluation. Many would qualify for humanitarian consideration, but that wasn't my call. My job was to secure the border. Someone else would sort out who stayed and who went home. The 3 coordinators were transferred to federal custody within hours. ICE agents were waiting when we arrived at the station, ready to begin interrogation. Whatever information those encrypted phones contained, it would take time to extract. But the fact that we'd captured them intact was a victory in itself. By the time evening fell on the first day, the operation had netted over 100 apprehensions across all sectors. Nearly 40 were confirmed criminal aliens, and the number was climbing as background checks came back from federal databases. But we weren't done. Not even close. The second night was when everything nearly fell apart. We'd been running on fumes for almost 30 hours, brief naps stolen between deployments, meals eaten while driving, coffee consumed in quantities that would concern any physician. The adrenaline that had carried us through the first day was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made every movement feel weighted. But the criminals we were hunting didn't care about our fatigue. If anything, they were counting on it. The call came at 2247 hours. A sensor array in a remote section of the Patagonia Mountains had triggered not the scattered readings of wildlife or small groups, but a sustained signature suggesting a large party moving through rugged terrain. Alpha Team Command. We're showing 30-plus signatures heading north through Grid 17. Aerial assets are 15 minutes out. You're the closest ground unit. Can you intercept? I looked at my team. Martinez was already pulling on his vest. Chen was checking her rifle with mechanical precision. Ruiz was studying the topographical map, tracing possible routes with his finger. We were exhausted. We were stretched thin. But 30-plus individuals moving through the mountains at night during an operation specifically targeting criminal aliens, there was no way we could let them pass. Command, Alpha Team. We're moving to intercept. Request backup as available. Copy, Alpha Team. Backup en route. ETA 40 minutes. Be advised, terrain in Grid 17 is extremely difficult. Limited vehicle access. That was an understatement. Grid 17 was some of the roughest country in the entire sector. Steep canyons, loose rock, and vegetation thick enough to hide an army. It was the kind of terrain that claimed lives every year, both migrants and agents. We drove as far as we could, then continued on foot. The night was moonless, forcing us to rely on night vision that painted the world in shades of green. Every shadow could be a threat. Every sound could be an ambush. Martinez took point, his Marine training evident in the way he moved silent, deliberate, constantly scanning. I followed 10 meters behind, with Chen and Ruiz covering our flanks. We communicated through hand signals, minimizing radio traffic in case the group had equipment capable of monitoring our frequencies. 40 minutes of hiking through the darkness brought us to a ridgeline overlooking a narrow valley. Below, I could see them, a long column of people snaking through the canyon floor, guided by the dim glow of a single flashlight at the head of the group. I count 34, Chen whispered. Maybe 35. I raised my thermal scope and studied the formation. Unlike the group we'd intercepted the night before, these people were moving in a tight cluster, following their guide like ducklings following their mother. Classic smuggling formation. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. At the rear of the column, 4 figures walked apart from the rest. They weren't struggling with the terrain like the migrants were. They weren't carrying backpacks or bundles. They moved with a confidence, an arrogance that set them apart. And 2 of them were carrying long objects that even in the green glow of night vision were unmistakably rifles. We've got armed subjects, I reported quietly. 2 visible rifles, rear of the column. Possible security detail? Martinez shifted beside me. That's not standard. Coyotes don't usually arm their guides. No, they don't. Which means whoever those 4 are, they're valuable enough to protect. I weighed our options. We were 4 agents against 35 people, including at least 2 armed individuals. Backup was still 30 minutes out. The smart play was to observe, track, and wait for reinforcement. But in 30 minutes, the group could disperse. The armed individuals could melt into the darkness. Whatever opportunity we had now might not exist later. Command, Alpha Team. Requesting guidance. We have visual on the target group. Multiple armed subjects observed. Do we engage or hold for backup? The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Caldwell's voice came through, tense but clear. Alpha Team, your call. You're on the ground. If you believe you can safely intercept, you are authorized to engage. If not, track and report. Priority is agent safety. My call. The words hung in the air like a weight. I looked at my team. Each of them met my eyes, waiting for the decision. No fear, just trust. Trust that I would make the right choice. We intercept, I said, but not head on. Martinez, you and Ruiz circle to the south. Get behind those armed subjects. Chen and I will approach from the north. We hit them simultaneously, catch them in a crossfire position. And the rifles? Martinez asked. First sign of aggression, we neutralize. But we give them a chance to surrender. Everyone goes home tonight if we can help it. We split up, moving through the darkness like ghosts. The 15-minute encirclement felt like hours, every second stretched by the knowledge that one wrong step, one snapped branch, could give us away. When we were in position, I keyed my radio 3 times the signal to stand ready. 2 clicks came back from Martinez. We were set. On my mark, I whispered. 3, 2, 1. Execute. We emerged from the shadows, flashlights blazing, voices cutting through the silence of the canyon. Border Patrol. Nobody move. Hands where we can see them. The reaction was immediate chaos. Migrants screamed and scattered. The guide at the front dropped his flashlight and ran. Bodies hit the ground in all directions, some surrendering, others panicking. But the 4 men at the rear didn't panic. One of them raised his rifle. The muzzle flash split the darkness, the crack of the shot echoing off the canyon walls. I felt the round pass inches from my head, displacing air before burying itself in the hillside behind me. I didn't think. I just reacted. My return fire caught him center mass, the impact spinning him into the dirt. His rifle clattered away into the rocks. Martinez was already engaging the second armed subject, who had tried to use a group of migrants as cover. A controlled burst sent the man diving for cover, then a follow-up shot disabled his weapon arm. He went down screaming, clutching his shoulder. The other 2 surrendered. They dropped to their knees, hands raised, shouting in Spanish that they gave up. They were done. Please don't shoot. It was over in less than 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds would stay with me forever. We secured the scene as quickly as possible, calling for medical support for the wounded subjects. The man I'd shot was alive. My round had hit his vest, cracking ribs but failing to penetrate. He'd be bruised for weeks, but he'd survived to face trial. The migrants were terrified, many of them crying, some praying. They'd been told this crossing would be easy, safe. They'd been lied to. As backup arrived and we began the process of sorting through the chaos, I found myself standing over the captured weapons. 2 AK pattern rifles, modified for semi-automatic fire. Professional equipment, well-maintained, recently cleaned. Whoever these men were, they weren't simple smugglers. They were soldiers. The background checks confirmed what I already suspected. The 4 men were members of a cartel enforcement arm, Sicarios, who had crossed the border not to escape violence, but to bring it. Their target, according to later intelligence, was a rival organization's operations in Phoenix. We hadn't just stopped a crossing. We'd stopped an invasion. By the time the 48 hours ended, we were running on nothing but willpower and institutional momentum. The final count exceeded all projections. More than 200 criminal aliens apprehended across all sectors. The list of charges read like a catalog of human capacity for violence, murder, rape, kidnapping, drug trafficking, weapons offenses, human smuggling. Many had been deported before, some multiple times. They kept coming back because, until now, the risk had been worth the reward. Operation Desert Reckoning changed that calculation. I didn't go home when my shift ended. None of us did. We sat in the sector station, filling out reports, debriefing with investigators, trying to put into words what we'd experienced over those 2 days. Martinez sat across from me, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hands. The cut on his forehead, a souvenir from the canyon firefight, had been cleaned and bandaged, but his eyes still carried the weight of what we'd done. You know what keeps going through my head? He said quietly. Those migrants, the ones in the stash house, the ones in the canyon, they had no idea what they were walking into. They paid their life savings to be human shields for criminals. I nodded. It was a reality we'd confronted countless times in our careers, but it never got easier. The cartels didn't see people, they saw products, tools, obstacles to be overcome. Migrants were a resource to be exploited, a distraction to be deployed, a cost of doing business. That's why we do this, I said, not just to catch the criminals, to show people that there's another way, that the coyotes and the cartels don't own this border. Do they, though? Martinez asked. I mean, we caught 200 this week. How many got through? How many are already in Phoenix, Chicago, New York, planning their next move? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times over the years. The border is over 1,000 miles long. We can't catch everyone. We can't stop everything. The cartels have resources, patience, and a willingness to accept losses that would break any conventional organization. But that's not the point. Everyone we catch is one who doesn't hurt someone's family, I said. Every load we intercept is a message that the risk is real. We can't win every battle, Hector, but we can make sure they never win easy. He was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. 3 days after the operation ended, I got a call from Supervisory Agent Caldwell. The encrypted phones we'd recovered from the stash house had been cracked. The intelligence they contained had led to follow-up operations across 3 states, raids on safe houses in Tucson, Phoenix, and Los Angeles, 16 additional arrests, the disruption of a smuggling network that had operated with impunity for years. Your team made that happen, Caldwell said. Not just the apprehensions, the intelligence, the pressure. You broke their network wide open. It was a rare acknowledgement in a job where the wins usually go unnoticed and the losses make national news. I thanked him and hung up, but the satisfaction was muted. Because I knew, as every agent knows, that somewhere out there, another network was already forming. Another group of criminals was already planning their next crossing. The fight would never end. A week later, I took Elena to dinner at a small restaurant we discovered when we were first married. It was the first real time off I'd had in months, and she could tell something had changed. You're different, she said over dessert, more present than you've been in a long time. I didn't know how to explain it. The operation had taken something out of me, sleep, certainly, and perhaps a piece of my faith in human nature. But it also reminded me why I'd chosen this life. Not for the glory or the recognition, not even for the paycheck, but for those moments rare and precious when you know beyond doubt that what you're doing matters. I remember why I started, I told her. I remember why I stayed. She reached across the table and took my hand. After 19 years of marriage, she learned not to ask for details, but she understood. The border will always be contested. The cartels will always adapt. The criminals will always find new ways to exploit our systems, our compassion, our belief in human dignity. That's the reality of the world we live in. But for 48 hours, we pushed back. We showed them that the line in the sand means something. We reminded them that behind every law, there are people willing to sacrifice everything to enforce it. 200 criminal aliens, removed from circulation, denied entry to communities where they intended to cause harm. It's not a victory. Victories imply endings, and this fight has no end. But it's a statement, a declaration, a promise. The border holds,